Welcome to the Brain or Shine podcast with myself, Mark, and Jules, where we help people to navigate brain injury together. This is a recording of our September 2025 webinar entitled How a Brain Injury Can Impact Your Relationships.
Yeah, welcome to the latest Brain or Shine webinar. So I'm Mark. If you're joining and you haven't met us before, I'm Mark, this is Jules, and we have a very, I was saying earlier, last minute guest, Jenny, but that makes it sound like you're late, doesn't it? It's not the case at all. But yeah, Jenny got in touch with us this morning and we've worked really closely together on a project which we'll let you explain at the moment. And Jenny's from Coventry University. If you don't know our backstory, I'm Mark with a brain injury and Jules is my wife who has to live with my brain injury every day. So we always say we're dealing with a brain injury together. And that's quite relevant really to what we're talking about tonight, isn't it? With brain injury impacting your relationships. And it's probably fair to say that we've talked a lot in previous Brain or Shine content about the ripple effect. So I have the brain injury, but Jules also has to deal with that every single day. But then the people that we know, our friends, our family, they also have to deal with the brain injury. If you work full time or if you run your own business like we do, then people that you work with have to deal with it. Also, clients have to deal with it. I've gone to business network meetings and had to drop out of conversations because I'm really struggling to focus. So that's a person who could be potentially one of my clients has to deal with it as well. And it can affect the way that we run our business because I could potentially offend that person, so to speak, or push them away because they think, oh, this guy's not listening or he's not interested. So it has a massive impact on any relationships. But what we want to do is we want to bring it to that first ripple today, don't we, really, and talk about the relationships within the home and maybe the relationships with your partners or your family or even your children as well. So that's cool. But Jenny, we'd love you to introduce yourself as well because you're sitting there waiting patiently. We've done all the talking so far.
Thank you. So I'm Jenny. I'm actually an occupational therapist by background, but I've got to know Jules and Mark through some research I'm doing with Coventry University. So my supervisor is someone called Dr. Hayley Wright, and she's been doing some research into supporting people with brain injury around their relationships. And I am now looking to do some work specifically with partners. And I think as a research group, we just recognise everything that Mark's just said, really, the rippling nature. And I think for me specifically in the research that I'm doing, it's recognising that partners are often kind of in the background and maybe not the forefront of the focus, but often experience a lot of trauma and have to deal with the brain injury and all the aftermath and some of the impact it has on that relationship. So it's been an absolute pleasure. I've got to speak to lots of partners and people with brain injury, and the aim of my research is really to design a support program for partners to just really let them have a safe space where they can work through some of their feelings. And we're interested in physical intimacy, but we're also just interested in a lot of the softer stuff as well, emotions and adjusting to this big life transition. So yeah, I'm more than happy to speak to anyone who's interested about the research or what we're up to. I hope that's all right.
So sorry, just going back there, we were saying about the impact on relationships. Now, the first thing that you come across, or that we were really aware of and we were thinking about, was somebody sustains a brain injury and it's quite a shock. So mine was a fall. I blacked out and fell in a toilet, and it went from everything being absolutely fine to, oh my goodness, what's happening? I'm in hospital. And I don't remember this at all. And then Jules dealing with the aftermath of blood pouring from my nose, not understanding, knowing where I was, then getting discharged from the hospital with an ear infection, which was obviously ridiculous at the time. And then me waking up the next day and having no recollection of it. At the time, we were in another country, so that was pretty difficult. And then we came home and realised the extent of my brain injury and had to go through all of those medical jargon, hear words that you've never heard before, like craniotomy, subdural hematoma. And you're sitting there thinking, I've got no idea what you're talking about. It might as well be in a foreign language. So you have that shock factor to start with that you've got to deal with. And a lot of that tends to surround the person with the brain injury. So like this, oh my goodness, you okay? This is very dangerous. This is life-threatening, and you've survived, and all this sort of stuff's going on. And other people obviously have their own stories where they're in hospital for a lot longer than I was. So that's the first thing we have to deal with. And
the shock is,
it was a shock for both of us.
Yeah.
Probably more so for you because I didn't remember it.
No, but the shock of finding out sometimes just how serious an injury that your partner sustained can be very, very hard to deal with. And then obviously if your partner at that point is in hospital for quite some time, then you've got a lot of other things that then you have to deal with that you've never had to think about before, like visiting if you've got children, getting them to school, all sorts of different things, medical things. But often what happens is once that person comes home, the idea is that everything's going to be okay, that they've been treated by the hospital and allowed to go home. So you just think everything's going to, for want of a better sort of phrase, go back to normal. But unfortunately, it doesn't. And it's the partner that first recognises the personality changes and the hidden disability changes that's happening to the person that suffered the injury.
Yeah.
Go on.
I was just going to ask Jenny what she thought of that as well. So you obviously come across a lot of people on the other side of the brain injury from us.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what a lot of people have told me, so that they feel like there's this whole kind of bit of trauma where they're ripped apart and they're, maybe if someone is in hospital, but emotionally they're kind of a bit disconnected as well because they're living different realities in that beginning bit. So they kind of lose a bit of connectiveness and it's just all a bit scary and unknown as well. You're expecting things like you say to resume back to normal, but no one's really there telling you this is what happens next. This is what life's going to look like in this amount of time. So I think certainly partners are often faced with a lot of unknowns, and at the time where they're maybe like taking on a lot of roles as well that the person with the brain injury were doing. So these potentially life established roles and routines all get disturbed and a lot of it falls on the partner. So they're kind of juggling 101 things while trying to deal with these unknowns and this trauma. And I think, was it like Jules said, this person that maybe is not quite the person that they were. And so I think it is a very tricky and quite traumatic time from what people have said.
Absolutely, it is. We've had to deal with different traumatic sort of situations. As you're growing up, you can't help it, things happen. But this has got to be one of the most difficult ones that I've actually faced as a person because, like you say, the accidents happened, whatever the accident might be, or the stroke, whatever, but your partner now is a different person to what they were pre whatever has caused the brain injury. So you've got all sorts of things you're trying to deal with, your emotions, your fear that you might lose this person. This is your partner for however long it might be. So you're trying to calm all of that. You're trying to understand what's going on. Eventually you get home and then you begin to notice that there's all these different things that they're now doing. Their behaviours changed. They're suffering with, we've talked loads on here about fatigue, but unless you know what pathological fatigue is, how are you supposed to learn how to deal with it? Whether you're the partner or the person with it, because it's just alien. It's not something that you've ever come across. And then there's the emotional ups and downs, which you're not expecting, and the mood swings. It's immense. All these things that you're having to try and juggle with, and you're still probably running a house. You've still got the family to do. You've still got earnings to go out and work and do this. The pressure's huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And I can see they're like, is it Anne Claire's put, people around me had to learn what I can and can't do. And I think that's the difficulties often as a partner, because you take all this on initially, but often it's hard to recognise when it's time to hand that back and actually give ownership to the person with the brain injury and say, no, you've got this now. And like, okay, yeah, you can do that, or you should be doing that, and knowing what level to pitch that at, and because I expect people want that sense of responsibility and independence to help their self-esteem and their confidence, and that helps the relationship. But I think things can easily shift when the partner struggles to let go to like a bit, that kind of parent-child kind of dynamic rather than peer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Anne says that she's been told to see a neuropsychiatrist. We saw a neuropsychologist. Yeah, and eventually we did, and it took 2 years, but 2 years of working closely with them for us to bring our relationship back onto a more even keel, really, so that we could live with what's going on, understand it. Accept is a word, but I think adjust to these changes and create almost not a new relationship, but a slightly different one. Well, not slightly, a very different one.
What Claire's put in there as well. So the first thing Claire's put is she had no memory of the majority of the hospital time. And it's quite amazing that my husband sent me WhatsApp messages in the morning and night to let me know how I was doing. And then you've not gone through them, Claire. And I really get that, because sometimes that PTSD type situation comes in. I used to relive over and over again what happened that night that I had no memory of. And I used to try and work out how I blacked out in the toilet, how I fell. Did I hit my head on the sink? Did I hit my head on the floor? Did I hit my head on the door? And in reality, it doesn't matter what I hit my head on, because I hit my head, but it used to replay in my mind over and over again. And I think sometimes that PTSD of what you go through is really, really difficult. So the acceptance of not being able to read those messages is massive as well. And there might be something there where people around you are sitting there going, oh, just get on with it, read them. What's wrong with you? Or somebody might be saying, oh, that would really help you if you read them. And you're sitting there thinking, I don't want to. So you have so many conflicting things. And then Claire also added afterwards, and these sometimes really break my heart when I read these comments, whereas Claire said, I struggle to live with me, and I really feel for my husband and children. And I've been there so many times where I thought, I let Jules down because I didn't do this right, or I've let my family down because I didn't go to that party, or my friend down because I didn't go and see them because I was really struggling. Or what will they think of me because I was very quiet? And you go through that over and over again in your mind. And then, of course, that spirals down into a pit of anxiety and low mood, and you just feel really, really rubbish about yourself. So probably in the answer, and Claire is saying, go and see a neuropsychiatrist. If you get that opportunity, that could be a massive, massive help. And Shirley said that she's been seeing a neuropsychologist for 5 months and it saved my life. And I was like, oh my goodness. Because again, that's where I was. I went through this process and I didn't know how it was going to work at first, but I just started seeing things pieced together. And both of us did, didn't we? We went along to a lot of sessions together.
Yeah, the first session was probably the biggest eye-opener for me in feeling I was being heard as the partner, because a lot of the time we'd go along and see people and they would say stuff to Mark and say that he would get better, or you need to give it a few more years, or this might happen. But I could see all these changes and it really wasn't working, and he was a different person, and we were almost we weren't working together at all as a couple for quite some time. And it was very, very difficult because Mark couldn't see the changes, didn't want to see the changes. So at our first session with our neuropsychologist, she would ask a question, she would listen to Mark's response, and then she'd look at me for my response. And I would say, that's not actually what happens. This is what happens. Because Mark at that point wasn't in that mindset, as somebody's put on there, of thinking, oh gosh, that's my behavior now. So it does really, really help. And I walked away from that first session almost, I got quite emotional again now, quite crying, because I felt somebody had actually listened to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Mark's brain, I was there, I was a person, and I was feeling all these things as well. So if you can get to go together and do some of the work together, it massively has helped. And the guilt that you were just saying.
Yeah, you do. It's something that is all sort of popping up on here, saying that we feel guilty because we have a brain injury, and it's, when you think about it, it's something that none of us wanted. And I would like to say that I'm probably answering for you guys, but it's not something we play on either. And again, there was loads of times where I used to think, am I just using this as an excuse? And then thinking, but I didn't bring that panic attack on, or I didn't bring that anxiety on, or I didn't completely forget what you said on purpose and decided to use it as an excuse and blame my brain injury. So yeah, it is very difficult.
I think one of the things, as we've been speaking to people, couples and professionals that have been involved as well, is that we really need to normalise stuff like accessing counselling and accessing neuropsychology or psychiatry or whatever it is, and just talking therapies, either as individuals, so recognising that each person in the relationship probably has their individual work that they need to do, but then also coming together as a couple and doing some work and maybe having some facilitated communication, because there is so much guilt and shame and fear of causing upset and stuff that it, I think, having worked in the UK health service for nearly 20 years, we'd referred people for psychology when there was thoughts of suicide or whatever. But now I would go back and I would literally say to every couple I work with, this is going to be tough. You need to go and talk to someone. I think that's, now I've realised, I can see the impact it has on people's relationships and their personal emotions, and kind of try and normalise that as a standard for everyone that goes through this, rather than the extreme end. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think we've on sessions that we've done, Jenny, we've talked about this normalising it, because brain injury, whatever form, there's so many people every day suffer a brain injury. So it is a very common injury to have. And so all this that we're talking about is happening to a majority, so many families, so many couples, whatever. And we just need to be able to, like you say, normalize these conversations and understand this is what, the after effects. This is what may happen. This is what can cause problems within that relationship. But there is help out there, but we just need to talk.
Yeah. And Shirley's just put on there, and that's a really nice thing to read. You've said, Shirley, that you've come to terms after 15 months with your craniotomy and accepting the new you, but you do miss the old you. And I think that's a real key thing. Again, I'll go back to the early days. I remember telling people, because I referred to it as a head injury, I didn't know what brain injury was at the time. Literally had no support, no insight to what was going to happen. Nobody said you may suffer with all these things. And I was down for a craniotomy and decided not to go through with that as well. So obviously life would have been massively different if I'd gone that path. And then you're saying there, Shirley, you're having a story to share. And then sometimes you have to tell that story so many times. So what happened? Were you drunk when you fell over? And you have all of these questions. It's like, this is what happened. And no, I wasn't drunk. And did somebody assault you? No, I wasn't assaulted. So I had to answer all these questions over and over again. And I think as time passes, people tend to stop asking you those cliche questions. And you just get the standard question, what happened? Or how did that happen? Or if you don't mind me asking, how did that happen? Which is a little bit easier to deal with. But when you're trying to tell that story over and over again, and you're thinking, well, this is what happened, but I don't understand why it happened, and I don't understand what happened, and you're still trying to come to terms with it, it's a really, really difficult place. So 15 months after your craniotomy, accepting that is a good time scale to get into that place, and that's really nice to read. I've just read what Claire and Shirley have said there, and there's two sides to support. And I remember this in the early days. Claire is saying that her counsellor, didn't understand, and you want to talk to somebody who's gone through brain injury. And again, I had that in the early days with brain injury, talking to people that didn't understand it. And then I actually worked with the psychologist, who was extremely well qualified, didn't have a brain injury, said to me right on day one, look, I'm not going to be able to get inside your head and understand what you're dealing with every day, but I have the tools to show you how to cope with some of these things. And she showed me a lot of mindfulness techniques, a lot of mindset techniques, which is quite ironic because that's what we teach every single day. And actually having somebody sitting down and show me those was really, really good. And she could link it to what she'd studied. So that was a person who didn't have a brain injury. And then I think Shirley put that she finds groups like ours, which is lovely to hear, thank you, and other groups and her husband, the best people to talk to because we understand it. And I think that's a real key thing. It's the understanding. So like Jenny, you don't have a brain injury, do you?
No.
But you understand it, and we felt really, really comfortable talking to you about it because you understand everything behind it without having a brain injury. So there are people out there you can talk to that can really, really help you that don't actually necessarily have the brain injury.
I do feel the kind of thing though about, you know, that person that you're talking to needing to have some kind of insight into brain injury though is quite important, isn't it? Because otherwise you can be misunderstood. And I think for people who are UK based, certainly places like Headways usually have some counselling services that they subsidise for people, but I'm aware this is quite an international audience, isn't it? But I think what I would just say, reflecting on what Mark said there as well, is like, as a health professional from a background, like I feel ashamed because I recognise now how I've almost added to couples' trauma, if that makes sense, how there's so much where you go, oh, you can do this care task, you can hoist them, you can whatever, change their pad or whatever it is, or, you know, without really stopping and saying, are you happy to take on this role? Do you have capacity to take on this role? Is this going to affect your relationship? So I think it's taken me to go to the other side to almost realise how much re-traumatization a lot of kind of professionals are doing as well. So
Yeah. And Claire has also said it's hard to find groups sometimes, which is difficult because sometimes the support isn't there or you don't know where to look. Joan said that mindfulness is amazing and very hard. And also I just read that Claire said that she really struggles with mindfulness because her head's like a washing machine. And I'm with you on that one as well, because I sit down and switch off and start thinking about a million different things because attention deficit is really high. I can hear noise. I can smell sometimes that I wouldn't normally hear or smell. And my mind is just going at 100 miles an hour. So it's really, really difficult. So it is tough. Yeah.
It is tough. And as Joan says, the other person in the relationship needs to have some empathy or it's not going to work. And very, very, very true. You need to have empathy. You need to have patience. You need to be considerate of the changes that they're going through. And sometimes, and this is the hardest thing I find, is certainly in those early sort of years, is, you know, you're doing all the empathy, the considerations, but often that is not reciprocated. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Because the person with the brain injury is working so hard trying to do all these things that they cannot quite see that knock-on effect. So it is a little bubbling cauldron, really. That's all I can think of. It's all this is going on, and you're just trying to battle each day sometimes, you know. Does that make sense to some people?
Yeah. What was also one thing that I found really powerful when we started getting support was that I didn't realize what I was going through. So it made it even harder to realize what Jules was going through. And then obviously we talked about guilt earlier. So all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, this is my fault. And then I went down the blame route of, well, I've done this to Jules. It's my fault that this has happened. It's my fault that's happened. And then when I started opening up and seeing it from the point of view of we're in this together, and bless her, Jules has never turned around to me and said it's your fault or anything like that at all, or made me feel like it's my fault. But it's how you feel inside. And then when you get back to that stage of working together on it and thinking, right, okay, fatigue's kicking in today, what a nightmare, how are we going to deal with this? Instead of somebody saying, or Jules turned around and go, oh, I can't believe you're fatigued again, you're ruining the day. that's obviously the last thing the person with the brain injury wants to hear. But also, Jules doesn't want to hear me going into the self-pity side, which I've done as well, where I go, oh, I feel so tired today, fatigue's kicking in, I've ruined the day, I've let you down, I've done this, I've done that, I'm rubbish. I mean, you don't want to hear that either. So it does come from both sides. And it's really hard sometimes to create that positive mindset, especially when you're feeling low, when you're feeling the fatigue, when you're feeling that you've sat down to do a task, or you're trying to stand up and do a task, whatever you're trying to do, you can't do it because you have absolute brain fog and there's no focus. So it's really hard to go, oh, yeah, do you know what? I feel fine. I'm going to deal with this because it's my brain injury and I'm not going to be negative. It's so difficult, as you say, it just goes round and round in circles, like that washing machine that we talked about a minute ago.
Yes. Does this all sound quite familiar to the people that you speak to, Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the only other thing that I would drop in there, just because I now have no shame because I'm talking about this a lot, is that when all these emotions are bubbling, what a lot of people have said to us is things like having sex or a physical relationship is really hard. So when you're living through this kind of trauma and you're on this constant state of high alert or whatever, and you're not quite sure how to read the room or the emotions, then it is hard to be intimate. And I know a lot of relationships maybe, are at a stage where they're not physical, and that's fine. And I'm not saying that all relationships should be sexually active, but I just wanted to acknowledge, that I think what's come out of this research is it's really common for people with brain injuries to have difficulty with sex, and for partners to have difficulty with sex after brain injury. And that's, again, something that I feel should be normalised. So I just wanted to drop that one in as well.
Yeah. I mean, everybody talks about the whole sort of the emotional, the physical, the just getting through the day, getting up, getting dressed, breakfasts, school runs, all the rest of it. And by the end of the day, you're absolutely exhausted. So any thoughts of anything like that is just completely out the window, because you're physically and mentally, both of you, just exhausted, aren't you? So, that has impacts in every area as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so I was just writing something down while I remembered it. Multitasking doesn't go well, does it?
You're doing well.
Yeah, and it is real key. It's hard to have that positive bits in your relationship, and even just to snuggle up on the sofa and watch a film if you're feeling really rubbish about yourself, and just to be really nice or do something really nice for your partner is really, really hard. Because again, I always remember one day buying Jules some flowers, buying her a bunch of flowers, and I'd not had a great week with my fatigue, with my mood or anything. And I was walking through town. I thought, I'm going to get Jules some flowers. And I walked all the way home battling with myself saying, oh, should I really do this? Because it looks like I'm just trying to apologise for being pretty low this week. And it looks like I'm maybe then Jules will just go, oh, you've only done that because you've been really snappy or something. And obviously none of that happened at all. I walked in and gave you the flowers and you're like, oh, wow, that's really lovely. Thank you. And, come here, a little hug and all that sort of thing. And it was really, really nice. But it was the way I felt inside all the way through that battling of, or should I take the flowers back, or should I go and give them to somebody random stranger or something like that, because Jules might see this the wrong way. And a lot of the stuff is actually inside our own heads, what we perceive is going to happen. I think we always use in our personal development programs that over 90% of what you worry about never happens anyway. So it is quite difficult to come to terms with that and say, right, I'm not going to worry about this, but sometimes we have to do it, don't we?
That's really lovely, Claire, what you've put. You take time for yourselves, for you two to be together, and so important.
Yeah.
I do love what Claire said, though, because I think what a lot of couples said to us was that actually emotionally, physically, it's possible to reconnect, and you can get there, but it does just take that time and effort. And often it's redefining what intimacy is. So what does that look like now? What brings you together? What brings you closeness? And that doesn't have to be what it was before, but how do you get the same feeling, whether it's a shared activity, a shared interest, or
Absolutely. Jenny, do you want to sort of wrap up and say about your project, if anybody wants to, how they get in touch with you? Or
you want me to, is it worth me putting my email in the comments there, and then if anyone's interested, I'm more than happy to send them just a post that explains more, or they can drop me an email. Unfortunately, I've only got ethics to recruit people in the UK, but I'm happy to informally speak to anyone around the world and just tell them about what we're up to. But like I say, I'm now at a stage where the kind of support program's hopefully getting online, and we're just looking for a few partners to test it and to tell us what they think before we can hopefully develop it and release it. So that's where we're at.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Please do pop your details in there. And then I think as well, if you don't mind, afterwards when we sort of share this, we'll make sure that it's in the comments on that as well. So
please do. That'd be great, because I think people are worried about talking about this stuff. So when they don't know me or my face, or or don't have a kind of trusted person going, this is all right, they just think I'm some weirdo that wants to talk about their relationship. Which
there is always that. But Jenny's email address is in the chat. So as I say, we will share that as much as possible. So there is a lot of valuable time and effort and research that you've put into this, and I think it's very, very fair to say that we're quite excited about trying the program out as well and working through that, because any support is really valuable.
Absolutely. And like you say, it's something that we need to normalise.
Yeah, definitely. We'll let you lovely people go and enjoy the rest of your day, evening or night, wherever you're from. But just a couple of things to let you know about. So first of all our resources are online at brainOrShine.com. You can register for future webinars and watch back any recordings of previous webinars. We also have our first Fatigue Hub webinar coming on the
second,
sometime in October. 2nd of October, is it? Fantastic. So we're just going to be focusing on tools specifically relating to pathological fatigue, which I deal with every single day, and so does Jules. So we're going to help as much as we can with that and build up a community where we can all help each other with that. We also have a regular podcast, which this episode will go on to as well, and a monthly blog and a monthly newsletter that you can sign up for. All this sounds like a load of information. Please just pick the ones that work for you and don't overwhelm yourself with it, because there is a lot of information out there. And thank you for your lovely comments on here as well. It's really, really nice to read that. And finally, the best one is thank you, Jenny, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for letting me come along. I'm buzzing. It's lovely to connect with so many people and share stories.
If you're ever free to share any wisdom or tools or anything on brain injury, we're most welcome you along. So
thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, and take care.
Yeah, fantastic. We will look forward to seeing you all on the next one and joining you soon. So take care, have a lovely evening, and we'll see you soon.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Brain or Shine podcast with me, Jules and Mark, where we help to navigate brain injury together.
Don't forget to head over to our website, which is brainorshine.com, where you can find a host of free resources, plus you can subscribe to the membership site.
Follow Brain or Shine on Instagram and join the Facebook community group too.